I know why Stonehenge was created, and it's not what you think. Written by Fatburner52. I write this now as I barely hang on to my sanity. My mind is in a state of disarray with thoughts of the horror that has been unleashed onto our world. I'm writing my accounts in this journal in hopes of understanding just what I saw in that godforsaken place, and to dissuade those brave or foolish enough to go to explore it. Up until now, I have kept the horrors of what I saw to myself, but I can feel it getting closer and closer to me. Sometimes I feel something breathing down my neck, or dream of being chased by the horrors of what I encountered in that place. Sometimes I can see the mangled faces of my loved ones reaching out to me, begging me to help them. I am slipping into the depths of insanity, even as I write this. I'm rambling, aren't I? Anyway, without further delay, this is what I saw. For anonymity's purposes, all the names stated here are not the real names of the individuals. I am, or was, a relatively wealthy accountant working for a relatively big company. I won't state the company's name for fear that some folks will come and try to find me. I don't like to see people anymore because whenever I look at one, I just feel bad looking at their innocent, unaware faces. I feel bad that they still view the world with the thin veil of ignorance, unaware of the horror that lies beyond. I feel bad that they won't be prepared when everything around them, everything that they know, ends. I'm rambling again, aren't I? Sorry. Anyway, I was very, very skilled in my job. Enough so that my coworkers, who worked for the company for years, looked at me with jealousy in their eyes. Some of them even tried to assert their authority as to them being in the firm longer than I was. But they would never try to do anything bad to me, as I was pretty close to my boss, who would invite me to dinner from time to time. He has such a wonderful family. His wife, Mary, always made the most amazing pork roast that I've tasted. One could say that she has the ability to impress Gordon Ramsay and his two children, Anna and Frank. They're such wonderful little devils. Anna is 9 and Frank is 10. Every time that I would visit, they would always greet me with the warmest, cutest smiles ever, so full of innocence and wonder. Oh, I miss them. I feel bad that I can't visit them. I also got many women looking in my direction as well. I'm not particularly handsome, but I've been told that I do hold a certain kind of charm. I met my beautiful wife, Rose, 3 years after I joined the company. Within the first 8 years of working there, we were able to afford our own home. Overall, our life was perfect, save for the $500,000 mortgage, which really is a pain in the neck, as we had to budget very carefully. I wish that I could still live my near-perfect life. Oh, how I miss her. The prelude of our disaster started on March 17th, 2015. It was a typical workday, both of us struggling to get our feet out of the covers. Despite the struggle, we knew that we had to get to work, or else we risked disciplinary action. My boss liked both of us, but he didn't discriminate when it came to discipline. After just barely making it to work on time, we went to our respective departments to tackle the load of papers and reports that awaited us. At around 2 p.m., our boss announced that our board of directors felt that workers in our company weren't appreciated enough. Therefore, they decided to conduct a raffle, with the winner getting a 4 days and 3 nights trip to the UK, all expenses paid. In addition, they could also take another family member with them. We were told to write our name and contact information on the forms provided. After everyone put their forms in the raffle box, we were told that the drawing would commence tomorrow and that we were to be given an early leave. Not only did we have the chance to win an all-expense-paid trip, but we also were given an early leave. Sweet, I thought. As I was packing my things and preparing to head home, I bumped into one of the board of directors. And by bump, I mean I literally collided into her in my hurry to head home. I got up and immediately apologized to her. She was a brunette in her mid-40s named Jane, but her looks said otherwise. She looked like a model and had a smile that could turn the heads of men and women alike. There were rumors in the office that she spent a lot of money on maintaining her appearance. However, all of them lacked any concrete proof. In addition to her appearance, she was also very nice and always tried to make good relations with the employees at the company. As I got up, I apologized profusely as I tried to help her pick up the papers that she was carrying. She said that it was okay and got down to pick up the papers. As she did so, I caught a glimpse of a rather peculiar tattoo above her right breast. It looked like the footprint of a chicken. However, the tips looked like spears, not unlike the ones that you would see in history museums. The symbols were surrounded by a circle. I think that she saw me staring because she gave me a seductive grin as I looked up. I quickly gave her the papers and apologized once again and immediately headed for my car, spotting my wife who was also making her way there. The next day was one of excitement. I had butterflies in my stomach, and looking at my colleagues, I knew that they had that feeling as well. As the name was pulled out, we all collectively held our breaths as the announcer said, "And the winner is Jack Dyer." The feeling in my stomach disappeared and was replaced by a cold sensation that traveled across my body. Everybody clapped as I stepped near the announcer and received my reward. Of course, we weren't getting away with a half day again, and we were told to get back to work after it was over. After work, Rose and I couldn't contain our happiness as we drove back home. We were ecstatic, planning our itinerary and talking about what we should see and what we should start packing immediately, even though the trip wasn't until next week. As I got into bed and closed my eyes, I thought about how much fun we were going to have at our getaway. I laugh about how ignorant I was at the time, and how my trip, that was supposed to be another happy memory to cherish, suddenly turned into that of a nightmare. The airport was bustling with activity. People were moving to and fro, trying to catch their flights or looking for their loved ones to be picked up from the airport. As we boarded our plane, I spotted a rather peculiar-looking man staring at us from the corner of my eye. When I turned to look at him, he immediately turned back to what he was doing. Back then, I thought that it was my imagination, but looking back, I'm not so sure. Though partially obstructed, I was quite sure that I saw a tattoo that resembled the one that Jane had. I just chalked it up to being a fashion trend or something, and I decided to read a book. Our flight departed at 9:00 p.m. from the airport, and we reached it at exactly 5 a.m. As we were getting through immigration, I felt the gnawing feeling that I was being watched. That was when Rose asked me, "Is that guy staring at us?" I turned to look at where she was pointing, and I noticed that behind us, just a couple of meters away, was the man who was staring at us previously. He was a massive beast of a man, about 6'5", and he looked to be of Eastern European descent. He looked to be in his mid-50s with a look in his eyes that told me that he had seen things that would make the normal man lose his sanity. It was the look of a war veteran. Intimidated by his gaze, I quickly turned around and told my wife that we had to get through immigration fast. A few hours later, we rushed to get a taxi in order to get to our hotel. As we were rushing, I kept on turning around to ensure that the man wasn't following us. At around 5:50 a.m., the driver pulled into the Hotel Inn Salisbury. I know, pretty fancy. But like I said, our company was relatively big. Our room was decently big. There was a massive king-sized bed that dominated the room and a bathroom that looked like the one in my boss's mansion. Rose collapsed on the bed before we could even begin unpacking. She was tired from the trip and so was I. As I collapsed next to her, I immediately drifted off into sleep. I was in a cave, illuminated only by a small light at the end. As I walked towards the light, I could hear disembodied voices from all around me, telling me to stop and turn back. However, it felt as if there were some kind of force that was pulling me towards the end. As I got to the end of the cave, my stomach dropped and I was greeted by a gruesome sight. In the cave, there were people being subjected to all forms of torture. They were screaming, begging their torturers, who all wore black robes with their faces concealed. They were begging them to set them free. Through the screaming, I could somehow hear the torturers mutter some unintelligible words. As I walked into the cave, all the victims stopped and all at once turned to my direction. Then, in unison, they all started chanting, "Gle glor, Asgorath, nefe gle, glor, Asgorath, nefe." They chanted that over and over. I was horrified at what I was seeing, but what really horrified me was the sight of my wife. She was naked and bound to a pole. Her torturer had cut open her stomach and was slowly pulling her entrails out. She seemed unfazed by the whole thing as she kept on chanting. I wanted to run, but I couldn't for some reason. It was like something had held my feet in place. As she chanted, her torturer stopped extracting her entrails and turned to me. Then, in one swift motion, pulled their hood back. What I saw was enough to make me run in the opposite direction. The torturer's face was covered in human eyeballs of all colors, all darting in different directions, as if to guard every angle of the eldritch abomination. As I ran, I turned back and saw the abomination had caught up to me and reached its hand out to catch me. As its hand neared me, I snapped awake, gasping for air. My sudden action caused Rose to get up as well. As she did, I looked at her and embraced her in the tightest hug ever, sobbing as I did so. She hugged me back and told me that it was only a dream and that she was there for me. After about 30 minutes or so of consoling me, I drifted off into sleep, still hugging her. This time, I wasn't greeted with any nightmares or dreams. The next day, I tried my best to forget about the nightmare as Rose and I rode the Eye of London. As the ride ascended, I looked out the window onto the streets below. It felt surreal, looking at the cars and the people from above as they jostled to get to their workplaces on time. I felt so alive as I took in the beautiful sights of London. When the ride was over, we went over to the Big Ben and we took a lot of pictures. Then we went to a nearby McDonald's to grab a quick bite. As we made our way through, I saw the man that was looking at us at the airport in my peripheral vision. When I turned to look, however, he wasn't there. I just chalked it up to paranoia and continued to make my way through the crowd that was moving around. For the next couple of days, nothing out of the ordinary happened. We went to all the normal tourist sites and destinations, and we even went up to Scotland to see Edinburgh. We both loved every bit of our vacation. However, this blissful, happy time of life was soon shattered by what happened on the last day of our stay. My wife and I were packing our bags, getting ready to head out for the airport. It was 11 a.m. and we had to reach the airport by 9 p.m. As I was packing, Rose told me that we hadn't seen Stonehenge yet. The monument was barely 30 minutes from where we were staying. I couldn't believe that I had forgotten about it. We then decided that we could go there once we finished packing. At around 1 p.m., we were standing in the presence of the massive, awe-inspiring structure. I had seen it in pictures and in movies, but looking at it up close made me wonder how and why did the primitive man move such large stone slabs to make this structure? What purpose did it possess? I'm sure that everyone around me felt the same way. There were thousands of people from all over the world pushing each other just to get a glimpse of the primitive structure. As we were in the process of taking pictures, I had the gnawing feeling that I was being watched. I turned to my right, and at that moment, my stomach fell. To my right, I saw the Eastern European man staring at me with eyes of bloodlust and hate. I was paralyzed with fear. I couldn't even let out a scream or signal my wife that we needed to get out of there, and fast. Suddenly, the man lunged at me, and at that moment, I broke out of my trance and grabbed my wife, who had just noticed the man. We tried to lose him in the crowd. After moving around in the crowd, keeping our distance, I spotted Jane among the crowd. I didn't know why she was there, but I didn't care. I was just so happy that there was someone who could save us from this beast of a man. She noticed me as we came close to her. Just as we reached her, she pulled out 2 syringes in blinding speed and stuck both of us at the same time. She moved so fast that I doubt that anyone saw her. Or maybe they did, and they did nothing to help us. As I lost consciousness, I heard her shouting at the man in Russian. I hit the ground hard while looking up at my wife before the whole world turned black. When I awoke, it was evening. The sun had just set over the horizon, and the clouds were an ominous gray. I looked around, and I saw that I was surrounded by the massive stones that made up the Stonehenge. I turned to my right, and I noticed that Rose was next to me, regaining her consciousness. As I tried to move towards her, I noticed that I was bound by a thick rope. I looked at Rose more carefully and realized that she was bound as well. "How are you doing, Jack?" I heard a feminine voice say. I turned to the front and noticed Jane, who was wearing the same black robe as the beings that I saw in my dreams. She was grinning menacingly. What's going on?" I asked her, barely able to speak, still reeling from the effects of the drug. "Everything will be explained in due time," she said. I looked past her to see more people adorned in the same black robes, moving rocks and carving strange runes towards the center. Their hoods were off, and I could see the entire board of directors, the Eastern European man, and a few others that I didn't know. In total, I think that there were about 30 of them. After they finished, the board of directors walked up to me and Rose, who had now fully regained consciousness and was just beginning to take in what was happening. Then, one of the board of directors, Simon, spoke up. "I guess that we should explain," he said, flashing me an evil grin. "In the past, before man had begun civilization, there were beings of power who ruled over the world. These beings came from planets far beyond the reach of any mortal species. Planets that exist in planes inaccessible to us. They were what we refer to now as gods. Most of them came to this planet to help the uncivilized native species to develop their civilization. However, their mere forms and language drove the locals mad. Therefore, they sent prophets to pass on their knowledge. But there are those who wanted power, to rule over everything and be superior to their brothers and sisters. Among those power-hungry gods, there was Asgurgoth, the god of chaos. He was one of the most powerful among his siblings and even led a rebellion to overthrow Zaragoth, the ruler of all. After a bloody battle, Asgorgoth was defeated. His followers were killed, and he was contained in this very spot. He gestured around him to the stones. Of course, Asgorgoth wasn't going to go down in such a pathetic way. In the course of centuries, he recruited new followers. He explained as he showed me the side of his neck, which had the same chicken footprint tattoo. Now that the old gods have died out, Asgorgoth is free to come out of his containment and take what is rightfully his. During the time that he was talking, I had reached back into my pocket to retrieve my butterfly knife, which I was relieved was still there. I guess they thought that I was harmless enough that they didn't see the need to search me. Idiots, I thought to myself, as I began cutting the ropes while trying to buy time by engaging the madman in conversation. So, when he comes back, he'll take over everything? I asked. Yes, Simon responded. Well, won't that mean that even you would be enslaved? I asked him. Yes, we would, but Asgorgoth has promised us that he would make us his generals, that he will give us power beyond imagination. At this point, I knew that these people were mad, talking about gods and monsters. Just as I managed to cut the first of my bindings, Simon picked up Rose and dragged her over to the makeshift altar that they had prepared. All the while she was screaming, begging them to let her go. Let her go, I screamed as he dragged her onto the altar. We can't do that, Simon said. Asgorgoth demands despair and blood in order to be awakened. That's why we conducted this raffle. That's why we rigged it so that you and your wife could come here and awaken the ancient god of destruction. I was reeling from this revelation as he got her to kneel down in the middle of the altar. Then, everyone began chanting, Gle-Gorath, Asgoroth, Nefe, Gle-Gorath, Azeroth, Nefe. For some reason, I could actually comprehend what they were saying, and they kept chanting. All hail Asgoroth, the Chaos God. All hail Asgoroth, the Chaos God. Just then, Simon pulled out a knife from under his robe. Rose screamed as he brought it up to her neck. Before he slit her throat, I saw her pleading eyes look towards me. Those eyes. I'll never forget how they were pleading, begging me to save her. Simon slit her throat in one swift motion as I cut the last of my bindings and rushed towards the altar, knife in hand, ready to kill. But before I could make it even halfway to the altar, the ground started shaking, causing me to fall back. It stopped after some time, but was immediately replaced with cracks on the ground, all emanating an ominous red light. The massive slabs that made up Stonehenge also started to glow the same color as the one emanating from the cracks. The group of madmen now had started to chant louder and faster. Then, they suddenly stopped, as Simon said in a low tone, barely a whisper, "He has awoken." Just then, the ground began to shake again as the cult members stepped back. In the middle of the altar, a large fissure appeared, causing the lifeless body of my wife to fall into the depths of the earth. And what crawled out of that fissure still haunts me to this day. I saw two paws come out of the fissure first. The paws were made up of human feet of all colors. As they pulled the massive beast out of the fissure, my mind broke. The beast was massive, about 15 feet tall and made up of human and alien body parts. Its paws were made up of human and alien feet alike, connected to the body by human hands of all colors and webbed human-looking hands, all wriggling, all trying to free themselves from the beast, but to no avail. Around each of its legs were 2 pairs of spines and tendons wrapped around so tight that the hands were bleeding profusely, blood seeping down onto the ground. It had the body structure of a lion, however, the head and tail were missing. In place of the head were eyeballs, dozens of them, human and alien alike, darting in all directions, all bloodshot. Its body was made up of human heads. They had no eyes, and all of them had a look of permanent pain and despair etched into them. There were also heads of strange, aquatic beings. They were all screaming, all pleading for help in different languages, shattering the quietness of the night and replacing it with a cacophony of pain and despair. Among the heads, I saw my wife. Her feeble attempt to scream for help was for naught, as from her mouth protruded a slimy, green tentacle that was at least 50 feet long. There were 4 more heads in the same state as my wife, making the abomination have 5 tentacles in total. At that moment, I think I went mad. Simon and the rest of the cult approached the eldritch god, conversing in a language long forgotten by time. Then, all the screams for help stopped all at once and began speaking the same language of old. The voice was enough to detach my already feeble sanity from its place. Though I didn't understand the language, I knew that what it said wasn't good, as all Simon, Jane, and all of the other cultists had expressions of horror and betrayal etched into their faces. As they began to run away, the being grabbed all of them by its slimy tentacles and began to assimilate them into its being. I looked away to spare myself from the horrifying sight, and when I turned back, they were all in the same state as the other heads, all begging for help. That's when Asgorgoth noticed me and spoke, the words menacing, like that of a predator who knew that it had cornered its prey. Though the language was alien, I could still make out what was being said.
Hello there, little one. I can see that you are filled with despair. Oh my. You would give me just the necessary power to fully break out of my confinement. Now, come here and become one with me.
Just then, it leaped forward, trying to catch me with its immense speed. I dodged just in time and ran as fast as I could to get out of the circle. As I was almost out, one of its tentacles grabbed my ankle and pulled me down, dragging me towards it. I still had my butterfly knife in my hand, and I used it to slash the tentacle, cutting it cleanly. The beast screamed as I got back to my feet and ran as fast as I could. As I looked back, I could see the beast trying to get out of the circle, trying to get me. However, there was an invisible force field that was preventing it from unleashing its horrors onto our world. As I stopped to get a better look, the beast suddenly vanished into thin air. However, I could still, just barely, make out its invisible form moving around. I ran, and I ran until I came back to my hotel. As I got back, I started laughing hysterically, trying to contain myself, but failing. One of the staff cautiously walked up to me and asked me whether I was all right. I looked up and saw the man. He looked so much like Simon. I know that I shouldn't have. I know that he wasn't Simon. I know that this wouldn't have brought Rose back. But my heart was filled to the brim with despair, and my mind was filled with insanity. I couldn't stop myself as I thrust the knife into his stomach and began cutting it open, laughing like a madman as security tried to contain me. I was put into jail for a month, before the court finally deemed me insane and decided to move me back to the States. Once there, I was immediately put into a straitjacket and immediately put into a mental institution, one whose name I would rather not state here. I write this now as I slowly slip into insanity. I don't know how long I've been here. Months, years. I don't even know anymore. All I know is that I've been hearing the voices of my dead wife talking to me, prompting me to go back to that God-forsaken place. I give this strong warning to anyone who wants to visit Stonehenge. Do not go there. Though you may not encounter the beast, it's still there, watching you, still concealed in its invisible form. It's getting stronger and stronger by the minute. I can feel it. It's going to break free at any moment and spread its madness across the world. Oh, no. I can hear footsteps. They're not human. They're quadrupedal. It's coming for me. I can hear my dead wife again. It will not have me, though. I see a knife. Yes, that's it. I'll end it all right here and right now. This journal was found in Johns Hopkins Hospital on March 21st, 2017, alongside the deceased patient. Reports say that the nurses heard screaming coming from the patient's room and immediately went to check on him. The patient was found on the floor, bleeding from his wrist while chanting, Gle Golgor Asgarath Nefe, Gle Golgor Asgarath Nefe, as he lost his consciousness.